he's not sort of special forces. He's not on the prone to capture list. You would do pretty significant training in a very significant closed training environment were he to be that. And this is where we come into his expertise again, the fact that he was a computer network engineer. That, to me, seems to be the key to what he's potentially charged with. It's what he could do within that network, which could be compromised for the future of British systems or military systems.
But first, let's consider this. He's been on the run for about 38 hours, but there are still no confirmed sightings of Daniel Abed Khalife, the soldier turned escaped prisoner. Police say they've received more than 50 calls from the public. Khalife, who's 21, was wearing a chef's uniform while working in the prison kitchen when he escaped from Wandsworth by holding onto straps underneath a Bidfood lorry. It's a big vehicle. It was stopped by police an hour and 5 minutes after it left the prison, around 2.6 miles away at the junction of Upper Richmond Road with Carlton Drive. That's near East Putney Station. Officers say the former soldier, who was in remand, has already left the country. Well, they think he might have done anyway. But more than 150 counter-terrorism officers and staff are focusing their search efforts in the Kingston and Staffordshire areas. A trial date for Khalife had been set for November the 13th at Woolwich Crown Court. Well, let's talk to Major General Chip Chapman, former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence. Major General, good evening to you.
Good evening, Henry.
I'm wondering what you make of it. Before you answer, let's think about this. I mean, we're talking about a former soldier here who was serving with the 22 Signal Regiment. He was arrested and accused of breaking the Official Secrets Act, planting a fake bomb and spying for a hostile state, presumed to be Iran. Now, the police and politicians are taking this very seriously. How concerned are you as a former head of counter-terrorism at the MOD? What do you read into this?
Well, let's go to the left of ARC and the right of ARC, Henry. The left of ARC is this was a spy fantasist with time to kill and plot. And we've seen that particularly in people escaping from prisons. Used to happen in Northern Ireland, Crumlin Road or the Maze. On the right of ARC, he could have been an Iranian asset and he's been helped, which is why you have seen no sightings of him in the last 36 hours. And the truth is probably somewhere between the two. And I say that because I think these are probably proxy offences that he's been charged with. So if you look at the two offences, the counter-terrorist offence, about 3 canisters with wires on a desk in his accommodation, that doesn't seem like the act of someone that you would want to be an Iranian asset or an asset for a foreign power. That is no tradecraft and you'd have compromised yourself. And indeed, if he went absent on the 2nd of January this year, and was only picked up by the police 24 days later by his car, you'd have thought that he might have said, you need to get me out, I've been compromised. And he didn't do any of that. What I suspect is actually the real truth here is that the other offence, the official secrets offence, that was gathering information that could be useful for an enemy between 1st of May 2019 and 6th of January 22, means that there's a longevity to what he's been doing. He was a computer network engineer, and he may have been either exfiltrating data or indeed putting devices into that data from the Iranians were he to be working for them. By that I mean malware or spyware or Trojans to be useful for the Iranians in the future. Now, the only comparable thing I can think of in terms of we haven't seen him for 38 hours so far is if you look at the George Blake case from 1966 when a Russian double agent came out, he was in a safe house before he was exfiltrated across the channel and actually was driven in a camper van to the East German border when he went into Moscow. So if he's helped by the Iranians, he could be in a safe house. He could just be in the urban jungle and he could have had something under his chef's uniform, which he took off his chef's uniform because one of the things in the urban jungle is you can play many characters. And who do people want you to be? There's a very famous book about an escape from Berlin in 1916 when a guy exfiltrated himself to the Dutch border, taking that philosophy. So there's more to this. And indeed, I think these are proxy charges. That is the most common terrorist charge relating to prosecution in the country, concerns collection and dissemination of material. But often that is because the police were forced to act when there was either a plot or very sensitive information which they didn't want to disclose. So I suspect there is more to this than we actually know at the moment.
It could be so, Chip. It could be so. I mean, he was due to stand trial on November the 13th at Woolwich Crown Court, and we're obviously in the realm of speculation, or in your case, probably educated speculation. But in the case of George Blake, I can't remember how old he was back in 1966. But this guy, Daniel Khalife, is only 21 years old today. And if he's accused of gathering information useful to an enemy between May the 1st, 2019 and January 6th, 2022, May the 1st, 2019, that's 4 years ago, he would have been 17. What are we to make of that?
Yeah, that's right. That's why one of the things here is that he could well be a fantasist with mental health issues who wanted to do something to make himself look notable. In that sense, it could be very similar to the American in February who released all the information from the American Air Force Base. It is phenomenal that he's 17. I don't think you can read too much into the fact that he's in the army in terms of his ability to invade. Now, there is a thing in the army called SIR training. That's survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. The idea of that is to return with honor if you're captured by the enemy. But he was a non-frontline personnel, and all he's really mandated to do is watch a DVD in his military annual training test. He's not special forces, and he's not prone to capture.
That doesn't sound very high level, Chip, because I'm just looking at a quote from Commander Dominic Murphy, who's with the Met and the anti-terrorist branch, I think. And here's a quote from him. We have some of the best military in the world here in the UK, and he was a trained soldier. So ultimately he has skills perhaps some sections of the public don't have. But I also read, so the quotes ended there, but I also read that this guy is described as, quotes, jovial, a bit dopey and playful. So I thought, how much can he know?
Yeah, that's exactly the case in terms of he's the second of those two, Henry. So he's not sort of special forces. He's not on the prone to capture list. You would do pretty significant training in a very significant closed training environment were he to be that. And this is where we come into his expertise again, the fact that he was a computer network engineer. That, to me, seems to be the key to what he's potentially charged with. It's what he could do within that network, which could be compromised for the future of British systems or military systems. And of course, you can cross-reference to that. And it's those things that I mentioned, potentially introducing malware or Trojan horses, viruses, things like that. And that's when, of course, NCSC, the National Cyber Security people, would be involved. So there's more to this, I think, than, as I said, meets the case. What I do think would be going on now is that to get out of the prison, of course, normally you would do a pattern of life study to look at the human, physical, and technical vulnerabilities. Or once you've done that, and he's been there for a while, so he could have done that, or you can compromise people, insiders or outsiders, particularly if you use the assets of a state agency. Because one thing about the Iranians is we know from Ken McCullum, the head of MI5's annual threat update in 2022, that the instability in Iran is bringing real-life consequences to the UK. And indeed, in that year, there were 10 threats to the UK or individuals in the UK who were opposed to the Iranian regime, which were either going to be kidnapped or killed and were prevented by the work of MI5 and Counter-Terrorist Command.
Wow. Final thought, Chip. I mean, we've heard about the poor vetting that recruits to the police have undergone in recent years. What about recruits to the army? What can we say about the vetting there, if this is what we think it is?
There is some vetting, but it's done to different levels depending on your access and what job you do. So if you're at the highest level of vetting, you do develop vetting if you have access to secret, top secret. He wouldn't be probably at that level, but I don't know enough about what networks he was involved in. So it could be that he did have decent vetting, but, people slip through the net from time to time. That's another thing that they'll be looking at in the future.
I'm sure they will. Major General Chip Chapman, thank you very much for giving us the benefits of your expertise. This is Henry Bonsu on Times Radio. If you want to feed into our conversations about this or anything else you hear over the next 2 3/4 hours, you are welcome to do so by texting, here's the number, 87222, and start your message with the word Times. You may just want to say, hey, Bonsu, it's good to have you back after 2 weeks away. Thank you very much. On